Welcome to episode 84 of Discourse in Magic with Allan Hagen. Allan is an absolute genius when talking about close-up magic, and in this episode, we hit on absolutely all of it. We talk about how you can find effects that are right for you, how to make presentations that resonate with you, and most importantly, how to practice and how to turn your okay effect into an incredible piece of magic. You guys are going to absolutely love this episode because you can go from learning about how to pick an effect that you like to how to implement it and make it your own and make it special. I hope you really like this episode. Here it is, episode 84 with Allan Hagen. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Discourse in Magic. My name is Jonah.
My name is Tyler.
And we are here with a very, very special guest. Again, somebody who I'm excited to say that, I found through the world of Instagram for a little while, which is just an absolute goldmine to finding talented magicians. And I've been really, really impressed with his work, and I'm super excited to get down into the details of doing fantastic card magic. Here it is, Allan Hagen. Allan, how are you doing?
Hi, thank you so much, Jonah and Tyler, for having me. I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing very, very well.
Yeah.
Super excited to have you on the
Ready
podcast.
to dive
Thank
into
you. Thank you. Likewise.
So let's start the way that we start all of our episodes, which is how did you get into magic?
All right. It's probably not too different from most people.
Which is
a little bit of background. I live in Norway. It's a tiny little country in northern Europe with only 5 million people. It does not have a big buzzing magic scene. So I attended a Christmas party at my dad's work when I was about 5 years old. I'm 27 now, so this was a while ago. And I saw a magician, and I thought, oh, wow, that's great. I would love to do that. And shortly thereafter, I got a magic kit, presumably for my 5th birthday. And I just never stopped. So when I was 9 or 10, I discovered card magic, and I bought a Norwegian magic book. And then, later on, I learned English because I didn't speak a single word of English until I was about 7. And then I discovered the wonder of online magic stores in the early 2000s, and it just kind of exploded from there.
And what a beautiful story in the sense that, as much as it seems as if there might be less magic going on in Norway, it's still a very similar story to like Tyler and I, how our way into magic is the online sort of magic space. And now, people get into magic, their first line is like YouTube and Instagram and things of that nature, but we are the OGs of magic sales online. So that's very
maybe the last generation that purely got into it through the medium of books, exclusively
exactly.
through books. Before, video downloads and everything was all around.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a very reminiscent history and very nice to hear. And let's dive in. So you do primarily card magic, and the magic is absolutely fantastic. And let's talk about that a little bit. So why card magic? Why are you hooked on it? And how do you use it to sort of make it your own and do interesting stuff with it?
Well, I think everyone has some sort of relationship with a deck of cards, whether that is, playing. At least I'm talking from my experience in Norway. Whether that is playing card games at the cabin, or if they built little card houses, or if they were interested in magic, or whether it's high stakes poker games. What do I know? I mean. So there's obviously some sort of inherent cultural and historical value, and it's some sort of relevance. That's one part of it, and the other part of it is it's just 52 pieces of paper, so that they aren't inherently anything. The meaning and the value is whatever you attach to it. So it's just the rules of a game or a really good piece of magic.
which is a very nice thing for us because, it can be treated in a way where the cards are representative, higher values are more important, like card games, or it could be treated, like you're mentioning, like 52 pieces of paper, objects that can just do very interesting and magical things. So it's nice to hear you mention it like that. There's some people who are very sold on like the gambling aspect of Magic, but I like that you are as enticed and excited about a deck of cards as we
They're
are.
A creative space, not a...
Right. There's limitless potential in a deck of cards. The whole thing about how they say that there's an almost endless supply of orders that a deck of cards can be shuffled into. What is it, like 8 times 10 to the power 67 or something?
52 factorial, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Big numbers, big numbers.
Yeah. So it's a number 8 with 68 other digits behind it, right? I think just like that, there's also kind of an endless supply of things that you can do with a deck of cards. But of course, if it starts to get repetitive, then people are going to get bored. So I think the trick to good card Magic is not in the cards, but I think it's about making it about the people, and of course it's very much about story, structure, substance, and character.
Right. So I just want to touch on that a little bit because I agree there's almost an endless supply of themes and premises and things that you can do in Magic. But on the same note, there is sort of classic plots, and there's plots that even as time develops, the plots still move with us. As an example for people at home, Triumph is a plot which has... And for anybody who's very new to Magic, shuffling the cards face up and face down and having them sorting, that's a plot where there's millions of variations. I don't know, maybe less, maybe more, but there's endless variations of that trick. But it seems like something that is embedded in a deck of cards. They can be turned the wrong way, and as long as there are cards, that plot exists. So can you talk a little bit about plots in Magic, maybe if it's something that we should be playing with pre-existing plots, or if we should try to be thinking right outside of that box?
So the interesting thing here is you're talking about that. You're saying that it feels like it's something that's almost embedded in a deck of cards, the nature of whether the cards are face up or face down, like that's a thing. What's really interesting about that is that reminds me of a discussion that I believe Darren Brown had about the piece where someone guesses, or he guesses which hand someone has a coin in.
Right.
And that is, as far as we know, a very recent plot and a quite original plot.
Yeah.
But it feels as if that's a thing that's been around for centuries. It feels like that's a thing that's like embedded in a coin that we're supposed to do a guessing game with it, sort of. You can see what I mean?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So I think those make for really good plots when you're using playing cards. If you can find a plot or a premise or a thing that seems like, oh, that's a thing people do, great.
So if sort of a young magician was listening to this and they wanted to start exploring plots, would you recommend to them to try to be as original as they can and start creating their own plots? Or would you recommend to them to dive into the sea of pre-existing card Magic plots and start, adding originality?
I think I would go for the latter because...
Right.
We are standing on the shoulders of giants here. There's so much good stuff in print that is written by people who are more experienced than all three of us put together.
For sure.
So I think it would be foolish and a waste of time to not go for the classics and the pre-existing material. Just work your way through Card College. Right. There's enough material there to last you a lifetime. Yeah. And then as soon as you find 3 or 4 pieces that you really like you might not even be able to put your finger on what it is, but something about those pieces will resonate with you. Mm-hmm. Whether it's the method or how it feels, or whether the plot appeals to you, whatever it doesn't matter as long as you like it. And then you get good at it, you get really, really good at it. And once you start performing it, you will find out what plays and doesn't play, and you will find out how you make it more entertaining, whether that is writing lines or introducing a premise or making it a metaphor. those things will kind of come by themselves. Not really, but I mean, you guys know what that feels like. You start performing a piece without knowing where it's going, and then you discover as you perform.
That's actually one of the first times we've had someone give real advice on how to find what type of performer you are, what type of character you are. Actually, finding it within the magic itself, within the existing methods that you know, and letting yourself just form by performing the magic that you like. That's I
think that's an excellent starting point, and then originality can come later. I don't think originality should come at the expense of quality.
100%. And I like the thing that you originally said, which is that there is so much out there that starting fresh at something, while it's not a bad idea, but it does put you at a great disadvantage to catch up to the quality of everything else, because there's information out there, right? It would be like if someone wanted to study science, them just going around in the dirt and starting there. Like, that might not be the best starting place. I'm sure you'll learn something. It's possible that you'll uncover something that no one else has found before, but starting
more than likely you won't.
Exactly. More than likely you won't find anything like that. So let's talk. Go ahead.
No, go on.
I was going to say, let's talk through creating something or putting together something. One of the things that I liked that you said was picking something that you like, and not necessarily, it doesn't really matter why you like it, which is something that resonates with me, because often I would struggle with what do I even like about this? And if someone were to ask me, why do you do that? I wouldn't really even have an answer. I would just say, it resonates with me. But it's something that's come up on the podcast. Multiple people have said that you don't really have to defend your likes. You can just pick what you like and move forward on that. So let's say somebody picks something that they like, which is a great starting place. Forget about why, just pick something that you like. How can somebody start working on it to whether make it their own or just make it interesting?
Well, there's two kind of schools to this, or two approaches. I think the first approach is to work on the method and the magic and how deceptive it is, and work on refining it, and which is stripping out all the junk and then trying to streamline it. So try and eliminate unwanted procedures. Try finding better techniques instead of using the standardized techniques for everything. A lot of people, when they're first starting out, end up taking a lot of detours, like they're using 4 moves to accomplish something that can be done in one.
Right.
So a good starting point to make something better is to work on those things, obviously. But sometimes you can't eliminate the procedure. So what do? Well, I think the way you solve it is more interesting than the alternative, and that is that you make it a feature. You make it a selling point of the trick.
Right.
You make it the premise of the trick.
Right, which is a good approach for especially like mathematical or heavy procedure-based tricks, which, if you try to shy away from the procedure, it sticks out like a sore thumb. But if you use it and you use it as part of it, you try to make sense of it, then it will often enrich that piece of magic.
You try to make sense of it, or you don't. You try and intentionally make it confusing. That can be the premise too, which is can be extremely entertaining if it's done properly.
So let's say we are there in the sense of, let's say we have a trick, we can perform it perfectly, we can execute it perfectly. Now what? Now how do we make it sort of resonate with people?
Well, I think for the first part of it has to be introspective. So it has to be, okay, what is the plot? What's happening? Is a card found, or is something restored or healed, or does something disappear, or do we have a coincidence type thing? Like, whatever the plot is, try and figure out if we can attach a metaphor or a grand story, or if we can connect it to something in our life. Like, I'm just completely improvising this, obviously, but let's say it's about a card that is lost and then found. That can be the story of returning home.
Right. So you're
that can be the story
make it
of
a
being
personal a personal. So
Right.
you're not trying to connect people necessarily directly to the magic. You're trying to connect them to yourself,
Yeah.
and in
And hopefully in the process also tuning into who they are and what it
Right.
means to them, and having them project that story and that notion onto their own lives, which is, a great way for engaging people. And now we're, getting into the territory of what I like to call real magic, which is, magic that means something and magic that is, transformative and has the potential to be really profound, hopefully without being too pretentious.
Right. It's actually, it just makes me think of like the definition of art in general. And this is one of those conversations that really solidifies my belief that magic is an art form, because there is, in some sense, I'm using quotations, artist statement surrounding it, an intent that the magician has, but there is a level of, introspection for the audience members. They get to, not only see what the magician is intending, but see what the magic itself does to them and how it affects them personally.
I think the most interesting pieces of magic I've ever seen, certainly, and hopefully also the most interesting pieces of magic that I perform, they're all about the audience, and they're all about what the audience brings to the table, and they're all about how the audience feels about something. So that would be a great starting point for someone starting to work on it. But again, it's probably not a recommended approach for beginners, because you're working with very abstract concepts and advanced ideas, and just focus on doing the magic competently first, and then you can focus on, all of this stuff later on.
Sure. I mean, I know for myself, I very much struggled and still do with finding presentations that resonate with magic, because it's so profound and so strange that it's very difficult to relate something impossible to people's real world, because on a normal average day or week or month, people don't experience impossible things. So the abstraction that we have to make is very, very large compared to other art forms, I feel, because in other art forms, anything that let's say you do a painting and the painting is reminiscent of someone's childhood, we don't have that tool. I mean, we can talk about magic in your childhood, but we are trying to relate to other things that are impossible, or other things that give people similar emotions or a grounding in their life. So I know that it's something that I've struggled with, to find meaning that I'd like to share in magic, because it always seems like either the magic is more interesting than the story, or the story is more interesting than the magic.
Yeah, you're completely right. I think it is a matter of balance, and it's important that the magic doesn't come at the expense of the story, but the story shouldn't come at the expense of the magic either. But I think throughout the course of a performance, and this, I don't think this is applicable to people who do strolling magic or anything. What we're talking about now is magic performed in a setting where you have sufficient amount of time to get time to know your audience. Whether that is an informal situation or a formal show, it doesn't really matter. Although it does affect some artistic choices that you're going to make. But I think you need time to really get to know your audience, and then have time to let your story unfold, because then one trick or one piece can be very story heavy, whereas another piece can be very magic heavy. And that's certainly how it is for me when I perform, is that sometimes it's just a really good trick. And It doesn't have to be more than that. It's okay to just do a really good trick.
And that's a nice thing to tell people at home. And the reason I say that is because I've very much struggled with, should my magic be about something that isn't what's happening right now? And a lot of people argue that it shouldn't, that magic should not be about a story, because it should and can take place in the present. But I very much like what you're saying, which is that, if you have magic that's strong enough or that is resonant enough to stand alone as the trick, then do that. If for some reason for you it resonates with a story or an idea or something of that nature, then to go along that path. And I think that in very short time, you'll start to figure out which type works with you better and which type doesn't. And it's okay to not decide to live in one of those two camps. You can do both. You can have a trick which is a story, and you can have a trick which is just a really incredible trick.
Yeah, I think I said you can have a story that's also a trick. And a really good example of that is Derek Delgadio's show In and of Itself, which is playing at the Daryl Roth Theater until May next year.
Yeah.
And I believe that every piece in Derek's show is a story that kind of has a piece of magic to emphasize a point.
Absolutely. I saw that show, and it was one of the most incredible things in my life, because one of the ways that I explained it to people when they asked about it, without going into the details, is I said, it wasn't a magic show, but it was magical. And, there was things in that theater space that we've never seen in a theater show or in a magic show, but would not have any place in either of those two things. Do you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean.
Right. So that was one of the things that I thought was so profound about the show, not to continually talk about it only because I worry there's a lot of people at home who haven't seen it, but I think that it's a great example that you can do things broader than just what we were talking about here. You can go broader than looking at your trick and saying, is this about something else? Is this about, but to do it the other way, and to have a piece of art in which the end of it, or the punchline, or a piece of it, or something of that nature is magic.
Yeah. And I think, again, without dwelling on the show, but I think a prime example of that is The Brick, which is, extremely
Absolutely.
transformative, and it's such a statement and such a punchline, and it's just a wonderful piece of storytelling at the end of the day. That's what it is.
Absolutely. And I will just say this, if you haven't seen the show, you should absolutely go. It's one of those things that keeps getting extended, how long that it's playing there, and I think that that's a very telling sign. And if you didn't have a reason to go to New York, now you have one. That's your reason. Go see the show.
I live halfway around the world, and I'm certainly going back to see it again and again and again.
I'm going back to see it again as well. So I think that's very telling, and I think that it's one of the things that I'd like to pass on through that to maybe people who can't see it, or even people who have, which is that everything that we're talking about in this or in other podcast episodes is to be taken with a grain of salt. And the reason I say that is because somebody can shock the entire magic world by doing something that no one is recommending, right? That no one is talking about. So obviously he didn't just start and do that. He has a lot of experience, but it's just a note to people that if you want to go a different route than what everyone seems to be saying, it might be like the guy playing in the dirt, like we were joking before, but it might very well lead you to somewhere where other people might not have been.
If you have an extremely strong calling, you have a fire inside you that just will not be put out, you are screaming and you really, really need, you feel extremely compelled to tell people a story, or to make people feel a certain way, or to make people, to create something, and you can express that through art and magic, and then you should absolutely do that, even if it is unconventional. Mm-hmm. Because I don't think the goal is ever to create something that is intentionally subversive or offensive, and no matter what you do, even if you try and appeal to the masses, or even if you try and appeal to a very small audience, not everyone's going to like what you do, and that's okay, as long as you like what you do, and as long as your target audience likes what you do.
100%.
You mentioned the importance of taking the time to get to know who you're performing for and know your audience. And I was just wondering if you had any tools for someone who is just starting out performing for real people on how to make a real connection before doing any magic. Because I think that's something a lot of young magicians struggle with, is they're into the social circle, is the trick itself, not actually, just approaching people and learning about them firsthand.
Right. So I should start with a disclaimer, and that is to say to take everything I say with a huge grain of salt too, because
Just a rock.
rock of salt, because I do not perform strolling magic, nor have I ever. I have on maybe 5 occasions in my life. So if you're talking about the cold approach, like, hi guys, I'm here to entertain you tonight, I know absolutely nothing about that. But
Right.
my best piece of advice for connecting with people is to be human, and making about being human and telling people who you are and finding out who they are and how they know each other, and talking about something that's relevant. Like, maybe you're at a special event and maybe the venue is something spectacular, and see if you have any commonalities, anything in common. I don't know. I performed at a corporate event over the weekend on Saturday, and while I didn't have too much time to get to know my audience beforehand, I only spoke to the guy that was like organizing the event, and it was the guy who hired me. And I had maybe 15 minutes with him, and then I came into the audience cold. But I write a little introduction, like a 50-word introduction,
Right.
to be read to the audience, that very concisely describes who I am and what I do. It's basically that I'm from Norway and that I do close-up card magic, and that I'm very dexterous. And then I came in and did the show, and in the beginning everyone's kind of like, who is this guy? What is this? And then you do a piece of magic, and I like to start with a piece of magic that is very... it takes them down one path, and then they feel maybe that path is a cliche, but then the trick becomes self-aware and meta, and it kind of yanks them out of that, like, oh wow, he does know that that's a cliche.
Yeah, it's not your traditional magic show.
Right. And then it ends with a punch, and their jaws are left hanging, and then they go, okay, this next hour is going to be good.
So you mentioned that you don't primarily do strolling magic, and I have seen in many of your photos that what you have is sort of a close-up show, what I playfully call, a Spanish style, which we don't see that much in the American style. It kind of looks like L&L Studios, as I like to joke. But I know that it's something that I do, and I'm able to do it because I do, part workshops, and I'm able to work with certain people. But I would just love to chat a little bit about the format of those shows, because, it's very different than stepping out onto a stage with lighting and music. You are setting your own stage with seats, a close-up mat, a table, and that's the stage that's being set. So I just wanted you to talk a little bit about that sort of format and how you use it to your advantage.
Absolutely, I'd be happy to. Yeah, I mean, I primarily do close-up magic and card magic, and I feel that it should be seen and experienced close up. So it kind of makes sense for me to have the audience be limited to approximately 50 people at the most. And if there's anything more than that, I'm not, I don't have anything against using video projection or any of those things, or even doing something like parlor material, or even doing a little bit of stage if I have something that plays bigger. But certainly my favorite way of performing are those, Spanish style close-up shows, if you will,
Right.
where I am more or less surrounded by people. Because I believe that the closer you get, the more human it feels, the easier it is to make a connection with the audience, and the more memorable it's going to be for them. And it's going to be very easy to have the audience take part in the show, and you're also maintaining your flow, because you don't have to bring people up, bring him up, give him a big hand, like that can break the flow sometimes. Instead, you can just hand the deck to almost anyone in the audience and say, hey, go ahead, shuffle, remove a card, whatever it is that you have to do.
That's great, and it almost, I know when I do it, I love those because it's got a whole new level of interactivity because you almost have the interactiveness of walk around magic with the stage set like a stage show, you know? So for me,
Right.
it's a very good example of a best of both worlds, and it is my ideal place to perform because I am with the audience and not under the, I don't know if this is the right word, but under the scrutiny of stage lights. You know, as
Yeah.
soon as I step out on that stage, I'm sweating. No matter if
Yeah.
I love the
Yeah, me
audience
too.
or don't love, I'm just sweating. Like it's a different, it's an absolute different feeling to step on a stage than it is to welcome people into your sort of gathering and your show.
I think it's for me. It's because I can't see them.
That's a huge aspect of
If I
being
can
on
lock
stage.
eyes with everyone in the room, I can very easily assume command of that room and feel like I'm in charge and that can allow me to feeling that authority allows me to relax and have a really good time with my audience and hopefully give them an experience that they'll remember
You can also
because I
see
will be
the
able to see them. Yeah.
exactly. You can see the impact that you're having on them, right? Like you can get audience feedback during your show, which is
Exactly.
massively helpful.
Instantaneous feedback, which allows you to adjust. Whereas if I'm on a stage, they can just be quiet and I could be either they could be stunned or I could be bombing really bad. And I just wouldn't know, you know?
And it almost feels like the closer you are physically to somebody, the more that they will respond visually. Like I can imagine when I sit at home, I don't say much when I see a video on TV. You know, I might be wowed in my heart, but I'm not going like, wow, did anybody else see that? You know, maybe on
Yeah.
when you're in an audience for a stage, you give a round of applause to show how impressed you were. And then
Because
once you
you're
get
one out of
closer,
1,000 people in that room.
exactly. What are you going to do? Like drop your jaw? Nobody can see you, so you express it by a round of applause or a standing ovation at the end or whatever. But in a close-up show, you can see them and they can see you, which allows them to be more reactive and allows you to play on that. I mean, I have a funny bit that happens in one of my shows where I prompt somebody to pretend that a card is not that I did not get the right card. And what happens is you see it in their face that I did get the right card. And I do it for that reason because someone says, no, that's the wrong one. But you can see it in their face that they're holding back the impossibility that it is the
Yeah.
right one, which
Yeah.
could never happen on a stage. You could have someone in
Exactly.
the audience say wrong, and you'd have no idea. You can't see them from the lights, and they're very far away. So
Yeah.
I love the format, and I'm excited to. You know, I've never really spoken about the details as to why it's such an ideal format, and I think that what you just said is really interesting, which is that you have a way better feel for reaching them and also the impact of each thing that you do.
Yeah. And I also think that they, once one audience member starts reacting and the other people can see and hear and feel them reacting, I think that they start to play off of each other's reactions.
100%. So let's talk a little bit about the magic itself. How does one know what is good magic? I know that there's a lot of people that listen to this podcast, and this is something that was illuminated to me, that a lot of people that listen to this podcast are not as lucky as Tyler and I are to be surrounded in Toronto by incredible magicians, and that we have a better ability to work with other people and say, is this good? Is this not good? Why or why not? And a lot of people have opinions about getting those answers from other magicians, but I know that it's been incredibly valuable for me to have other magicians in my world. But if there's somebody who lives in the middle of nowhere, or at least does not have a magic community for themselves, how are they to figure out if what they're doing is along the right track, if it's good magic, or if it's something else?
Well, good magic is, obviously a matter of taste and very, very subjective. But if you were to boil it down to the most kind of simple form of phrasing what is good magic is it deceptive? Does it fool the audience? Because it's a magic show and not a comedy show. So
Right.
People go to a magic show to have their minds blown, and if it's not deceptive, if it's not, fooling enough, then it doesn't meet the most basic requirement of magic, in my opinion. And that doesn't just apply in the moment. I think you have to consider the audience, eating breakfast the next morning, dissecting what they've seen the night before.
Right.
It needs to be able to withstand that sort of scrutiny too. So that's why we're using, false memories and lots of layers and lots of subtleties and recaps and, all of those things. Mm-hmm. All of these tools that we have to our advantage to make sure that they're left with a clear picture of what happened, which might not necessarily be what actually happened. So that's one thing, is just make sure that your magic is just airtight. Mm-hmm. The other part is it entertaining? Like, do people actually care? Is it engaging? Do they want to see this? Are they having a good time? I think it's very easy for magicians, for a lot of reasons, to get very, very introspective and get very stuck in their own head. Whether that is nerves or something else, depends on the person. But it takes practice and it takes experience to learn to tell whether an audience is actually enjoying something or not.
Right.
Yeah, and
yeah.
I think part of it is letting go of, like, I found when I was very young, like a kid starting in magic, I don't know, I would be frustrated with my audience if my magic didn't have the impact that I desired from it. And I think
I can relate
you have to
that.
let go of that entirely and really focus on changing the magic to be impactful the way you want it to be, and not changing your audience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, getting feedback from other magicians is very, very helpful and very, very good. I don't think it is necessary to become good. I think it is necessary to become great, but I don't think it is absolutely necessary in order to be good. But I think you have to learn to become self-sufficient, and you have to learn to be objective and analytical.
And that is one of the hardest things. I know when other magicians show me something, often my response is, I know too much. Like I say to them, like, they're like, is this good? And I say, I know too much. Like, I know too much about magic to express my thought on this. You need to show it to real people and tell me how they react. And that is a very huge point on this matter, which is other magicians are good because, like you said at the beginning, it allows us to stand on the shoulders of giants, not only by reading material that they've published, but also by just working with them and alongside them to do good magic. But really, there is nothing like knowing that it's going to work with lay people, with non-magicians. That is the best indicator that it's going to be great.
Yeah, for me, a lot of the stuff that I do professionally, when magicians see it, they go, "Oh wow, I have no idea how that works." Mm-hmm. And it's not that I ever approach anything in order for it to be magician foolers. It's because I don't really believe in magician foolers. I love fooling magicians, of course I do. But ultimately, I'm just making sure that really sharp analytical guy on the last row is not going to be able to piece together how I do what I do. Mm-hmm. And those measures that I go to, they just happen to catch out magicians too. A lot of magicians.
I think that's a great piece of advice. My deep beliefs about fooling lay people and fooling magicians is that a perfectly structured piece will have everything that needs to be hidden, and everything that needs to be sort of visible, and that if it's a well created and crafted enough piece, like you said, to fool the very, very intellectual, smart, not looking away from your hands guy who's sitting in the corner with his arms folded, then it will likely also fool a magician. And to use that to use that analytic guy sitting in the corner as your nth degree of foolability almost, instead of a magician.
Yeah, so I go sometimes to ridiculous degrees to cover up any inconsistencies or or any anything like that. And it really is ridiculous and it really is petty when you get to a certain point. But I do it because I like it, and I also do it because I know that they have been things that people have picked up on in the past. So even if it's just one person every 10th show, if you have the time, why not fix it?
100%. And Darwin Ortiz said it, which is that, magicians joke about how easy it is to fool people. And as he says, it is surprisingly more and more and more difficult. And I really resonate with that. Not that, we all know a basic trick that works with people, but to do things that are flawless, that don't have, missing holes or don't have or rather holes in it, or not missing holes, or rather, or just in general, anything that could catch their eye and give them that accidental peek behind the curtain that they shouldn't be seeing is something that we need to do. And whether, sometimes when you're sitting there dealing with the nth degree, it feels petty, but it also is what it takes to have something that's so perfect and as beautiful as, magic.
Yeah, and I think that even just a small discrepancy, if it's spotted by someone, that could be the thread that unravels the whole, mystery and wonder behind the trick, because they feel that they caught something, and then it's not magic anymore.
100%. And we live a very difficult job where we can't obviously people make mistakes, but it's different. If a comedian has 10 jokes and 9 of them are funny, he was still funny. But if the magician has 10 tricks and you know how he did one of them, the illusion is in some way broken. So
Unless you're a mentalist, in
yes,
which
of
case
course.
somehow paradoxically it becomes more believable.
Yeah, exactly. Everything's an experiment, so nothing really matters. But
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think that's something to keep in mind with people working on the tricks, which is that we have the requirement to go to the nth degree, because any hole in our performance is a thread that could unravel the entire show, which is not necessarily something that other arts feel. I think of movies, they might have it, like if a certain piece of graphics or whatever doesn't sit well with you, it might not.
It takes you out of the story for sure.
Exactly. So
it does.
Definitely there's other art forms that have it, but we do have it rough in terms of how perfect we need to be to complete the illusion.
It's about the perfect suspension of disbelief, and not the willing suspension of disbelief, because I don't remember who said this, but that's like equating magic to a school production of Peter Pan, and you can see the threads and everything, and that's not what you're going for,
Right. We need to fool people in a way that they are not accepting of saying, I'm not going to look. I know he picked up 2 cards, not 1, but I'm not going to look.
But I don't want to know. I don't
want to know. We don't want that.
I don't want to know. There was something more, Yeah.
Exactly. So we need to be able to withstand scrutiny and not hope that they ignore things. That
I invite scrutiny at the right moments.
For sure.
I think it's important. Yeah.
At the safe moments.
At the safe moments, exactly. Oh, okay. Well, I'm all done now. So now I can tell them to look closer.
Now take a look. Exactly. And I think that's beautiful advice for people at home, and that they have sort of a little bit of stuff right now to work with so that they know what to do. And also, I want to give almost a word of positivity, because for the last little bit, a lot in this conversation, we've been talking about how difficult it is to do good magic and how much time it takes and how much practice it takes. But I want to almost say something in the other direction, which is to encourage people at home to still dive in and still do magic, even though maybe you're not getting the exact reaction that you want, and sort of keep playing, because
absolutely,
it's how you get good,
It's everyone needs to be bad before they can be good.
100%.
And I when I'm working on new material, I've been doing magic for what is it, like 18 years now, almost 20 years since I got over 20 years since I got interested in it. When I'm working on a new piece of material, it's probably going to be pretty terrible when I'm first starting to audience test it. So even I need a place to to be bad, and so does everyone who's out there working. That's just how it is.
100%. And I think that that's something for people at home to learn. You know, one of the things I like to try to avoid on this podcast is to answer any questions with do it a lot. And not because it's not a good answer. It's a great answer, and it's honestly the truth, but because, you know, I want people to have practical and tactical things to go home with that aren't just quantity. Even though
so more nuanced than that, though.
100%. There's much more to it than just saying do it a lot, but it's good for them to know, and for anybody who's anywhere in their magic journey to know that keep trucking, you know, keep just trying to get better. We need the tools as well as time to get as good as we can possibly be.
Yeah, we need a little bit of everything, a little bit of chops, a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of charisma, a little bit of analytical skill, a little bit of humanity, a little bit of psychology. We just need a little bit of everything. You don't have to have everything of everything, because no one can humanly attain that in their life. So just work on becoming all-rounded in the beginning, and then find something, you know, that you enjoy, and then become really good at that. And then once you're really good at that, then move on to another area that you can improve.
I think that's beautiful, and I think that that's a great thing for people to keep in mind in their magic journey. So one of the things that I think is very cool that we've done so far in this episode is we started with we have nothing, what do we do? And we went to, you know, start in a book and or start, you know, Card College is a great example, or just find some plots that resonate with you, learn the methods, and then how to attach a presentation to it. The last thing that I want to touch on, so that people, no matter where they are in their journey, have something to start and take part in after listening to this, which is how does one practice? So how do you practice, and how do you make your magic that you've already come up with a premise for, you've already learned the methods for, how do you practice to make it as good as possible?
Yeah, that's it's a phenomenal question. And it's also a very difficult question, because it's a very individual thing. Mm-hmm. So more than anything, you have to find a practice regimen and practice habits that work for you. But I think the main takeaway, and I'm going to give you this up front, is that how you practice is just as important as how much you practice, if not even more important.
Okay.
I think for me, it helps to break down the practice into several steps and phases. So there's the learning phase, then there's the adaptation, or the phase where you're getting like acclimated to your material. There's the improvement phase, the refinement phase, and then that brings us into the final phase, which is rehearsal.
Right.
So we can skip the learning phase, because we believe we can skip the learning. Let me just do that again. So we can skip the learning phase for now, because it's very individual, and it's up to, you know, each person how they learn and how they gather information from a book. But I will very, very briefly touch on it. I like to do that away from technology, away from computers. I try and, you know, put my phone to sleep, and I like to do it in isolation, with minimal distractions, ideally late at night, because that's when I can truly focus, and that's when my head is as sharp as I'd like it to be. Mm-hmm. And I read through everything a few times to get a nice overview of how it's supposed to work, and then I try and run through everything with the cards in my hands and make adjustments along the way. Which moves into the adaptation phase, which is assuming you've gotten everything to kind of click by now, then it comes to getting really used to it and adapting the motions and actions to your own hands and your own body and your own personality. So this is when you work on things like finger placement and angles and kind of just getting used to it. It's really, really important, because then this is when you're laying the foundations for what will become muscle memory and instinct. This is how you take a sleight or a trick from working in theory to actually working in practice.
Right.
So it's about getting really used to it. After that comes the improvement phase, which is the phase that a lot of people mistake for practice. A lot of people think that practice is only the improvement phase, which is the repetition. And in repetition, yeah, you're going to do something a lot. And I know you don't like saying that on the podcast, but it's true. You're going to do your slides thousands of times, tens
100%.
of thousands of times. It's just how it is. But you're not going to repeating one slide or one trick 1,000 times in a row. That's really counterproductive. Mm-hmm. Instead, you're going to switch it up. And you're going to work on maybe 3 or 4 things at any given time. So you do one move maybe 50 or 100 times, and then you switch to the next one, and you cycle between them until you've gone through them all.
Which is comparative, just to interject, it's comparative to learning an instrument, which is just something that resonates in my mind when you're saying that, because, if you just play the same chord over and over again, you're not moving your fingers.
You batch chords together as you learn them. You learn like exactly 3 or 4, and then 3 or 4, and then 3 or 4.
And I did some research into why it's a good idea to switch things up. And then after doing those repetitions, those sets of slides, you let them rest for a day or two so that your mind can catch up.
I was totally thinking about that. How some days you wake up in the morning and you can all of a sudden do this slight better than you could the next day. And it's kind of like miraculous.
This is what's called muscle memory, and this is how you program your own brain and your muscle memory to learn new actions. If you break it up in steps and segments and you do a little bit every other day, then your brain has time to process the work that you did so that when you revisit it, you notice improvement. Mm-hmm. If you only practiced by means of nonstop repetitions, you wouldn't really be improving. You would just be cementing and making permanent those bad habits and unrefined techniques. Mm-hmm. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes magicians do when learning like technique. So it's not about practicing hard or practicing long. It's about practicing smart.
Right. Yeah. That's that is something that a lot of magicians fall into the trap of. Is they learn a move slightly wrong and then they practice that exact thing for 6 months and then they have to go through the process of unlearning it later on before they can learn it.
And the muscle memory is almost in the wrong place.
Yeah, so that's what causes you to have to unlearn it, and I had to do that. Like I learned this the hard way. This is me speaking from experience. Is that I learned certain moves wrong or inefficiently or didn't, adapt them properly to my own hands, perhaps. And I had to do a lot of work later on to correct those mistakes. Mm-hmm. And I ended up taking a big detour, but also learning a valuable lesson along the way. So detours aren't all bad because, everything is a learning process, which is really important, of course. And then, that takes us into rehearsal and onwards. And of course, refinement. So once, you feel that you've got something down, then you film yourself, perhaps, because the camera doesn't lie. So it makes it a lot easier to be objective when you can see yourself in playback later on.
Sometimes when I watch myself on camera, I blink at the magic moment as if
Yeah. We tend to do that for some reason. I don't know why.
We just want it to look good.
Yeah, that's it. It's a very it comes from somewhere really, really deep within that I blink whenever I do a shift or whatever it is, and I try very hard to not do that, but it's extremely hard to be objective about yourself, and that's why.
For me, go ahead, continue.
No, I think it's extremely hard to be objective about yourself, and that's why we're fortunate enough to have good friends, whether they're magic friends or family or just friends. Mm-hmm. We need someone who can be honest with us and say, "Yeah, I could see that from here. You got to work on fixing those angles." Because you'd much rather have a friend tell you than to learn the hard way during a show that you flashed or
100%. And like we mentioned before, because we're not asking for the willing suspension of disbelief, but rather the unwilling one, when somebody in a show experience points out a flaw, they're not the asshole. you know, and we often feel that they are like, oh, why would you say something? But because we are trying to make what they see impossible, it's just as much their job to point out a flaw openly as it is our job to make sure that it doesn't happen. So it's just, I like what you mentioned about being thankful that we have either the magic friends or friends and family to be our maybe initial testing ground after we've gone through all of these steps in practicing, so that we can see what we're doing right and wrong.
Absolutely. Because they help us see the things that we don't see ourselves. And if I were to give a really big tip and a really big takeaway for that, is to be patient and save your feedback for as long as you can. Because as soon as you show someone something for the first time, then you ruin the moment of surprise and you ruin the first impressions thing. Right. So if you're showing someone something that is very unfinished, they might focus on the things that you are already aware of. So work on the thing until you feel like you've fixed everything you can think of, and then show it to someone, because that's when they'll truly be useful and point out the things that you don't see.
That's a great piece of advice. I don't know how many times someone has said to me, oh, like, so this is wrong with it. And I go, yeah, I know. And what a waste of their feedback, you know, like what a waste of showing something for the first time for them to give you a piece of feedback that you already know.
Yeah. And what are you going to do? Come back to them in 2 months and be like, I fixed that one thing. Now what? They've already lost interest. They don't care about the piece anymore.
Yeah. And I learned that in film school, actually. When you're working and editing a piece of film, you save the most important feedback for last, for when you've fixed all of the problems that you can think of, because then they come in with a fresh pair of eyes and they'll see all the things that you can't see, and that's so valuable.
So that's the whole practicing procedure that you go through.
That's and it takes place from anything from weeks to years. I don't even know anymore, but I wrote a blog post about this a little over a year ago, and I tried to piece together the various phases that I move between when I practice, and that's sort of what I boiled it down to, are those quite distinct phases of learning, getting used to, improving, refining, and then finally rehearsal, which is when you take it out of the practice space and into a space that very closely mimics your performance space. Because I can sit in my t-shirt and practice at my desk and I can do everything perfectly, but as soon as you're sitting at a table with a pad and you have a big space and you're wearing a suit and suddenly everything feels different.
Right.
And you have to practice in that environment too, in order to get used to it.
And that's why in theater they call it a dress rehearsal.
Yeah, exactly.
I remember I was in university, I was in an a cappella group, and there was a dress rehearsal, and I showed up to the dress rehearsal wearing my outfit, and no one else was. And it was my first year there, and everyone was like, what are you doing? We're just singing. And I was like, what are you guys doing? Like, I've been doing magic all my life. Like, I was under the impression that a dress rehearsal means that you dress for the rehearsrsal. Is that not what? Anyways, they all laughed at me, but I think I'm right still. So
no, you definitely are, in my opinion. Yeah.
And I think that's a great piece of advice. And one of the ones that has come up before in other episodes is that magicians forget to use the final line of defense, which is a video camera, before we're brought into the real world. And it's something that people often shy away from. But I think that, some of the biggest flaws that we see in magic could have been fixed had they done it for a camera.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It is extremely, immensely valuable. And we live in an era where we have Skype and FaceTime, and everyone has cameras built into their phones and computers, and so we have so much technology. We have high-speed cameras built into our phones now. I mean, come on. We have these amazing resources and these amazing tools to help us be more analytical and work better and work smarter, and we should all be taking advantage of those tools. I sure am. I'm sure you guys are, and I hope everyone else is too.
One of the tools that you didn't mention that I would love to mention that's on the same vein for people who are working to make their trick good is not just the video camera, but also the audio recorder. To me,
Oh,
that's a
yes.
really powerful one. And for me personally, it's my first line of defense before I hit the video camera because it makes me realize that all the words I was saying were absolute nonsense and that I can change it and make it, if it sounds good, no one can see anything, but if it makes sense to hear, then you're ready to see if it makes sense to see. So I think that's an extra line of defense that people at home might get something out of.
That is phenomenal advice. I don't have too much experience working with that myself, but I will definitely put it into practice more. I think I've only done it with one piece I perform where I think the script is so essential to the success of that piece. So, yeah, that's a great piece of advice. Absolutely do that.
Well, thank you so much. And I also feel that, with this episode, we've given a real tool belt for people to go from
very practical, tangible advice.
exactly to go right from I don't know what I like, what to do, is magic real, what do I do, all the way to I am fully and totally prepared to present a piece for real human beings.
Yeah. And at that time, at that stage, it just boils down to have some fun while you're at it. Try and always remember that the magic is also for you. So try and experience that magic through your audience. And just really allow yourself to be in that space where you are receptive to wonder and magic and having an amazing experience. And I think the audience will feed off of that too, especially in a close-up situation like we talked about.
100%. And one of the words that I like to use to describe it is playing. We are playing, and I really enjoy that because it reminds me of the fun that we all got into this for.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean that's the goal for spectators too, is that we want them to experience that childlike sense of wonder, and we want them to have kind of a playful approach to things after they've seen us perform. Because having that mindset is very stigmatized among grown-ups, but I think it's so beneficial for them to learn to get to not be so serious about everything and just have fun and experience something wonderful.
That's an awesome piece of advice. And with that, we will start to wrap up the episode. What that means for us is still a whole bunch more questions. You know this because you listen a little bit to the podcast, but we have some final wrap-up questions, sort of rapid fire, but answer as slowly as you like for people to have some take-home points. So one of the first is that each of us go through the episode that we just spoke about and mention what we feel is the most or one particular valuable take-home point for us to take home. So for me, one of the things that I like, which has come up in episodes before, but it's that to pick something that you like and you don't really need to defend yourself as to why you like it. And it's so much easier to work through things and go through these steps, which, to somebody who does not enjoy magic or does not enjoy the piece that they're working with, these practicing steps that you just explained might sound grueling. That might sound like an indefinite amount of time that would just keep lasting over and over again. But if you're dealing with a piece of magic that you enjoy and something that you're excited to present and excited to bring maybe from a book to reality and make it great quality, then it's not grueling. Instead, it is an enjoyable process through and through, and that, the real difference between hating every moment of working on something like this and absolutely loving every moment is how much what you're doing excites you.
Yeah, absolutely.
How about you, Tyler?
So in a similar vein, not just what you choose to perform, but how and where you choose to perform it. I was really, taken back by the conversation between the two of you about doing close-up shows. I've never done a full close-up, as you put it, Spanish style show, but seeing, you guys break down the sort of impact it has on your performance style and the magic you choose to do and why it's meaningful to you was very interesting to me. So I think not only find what sort of material you want to perform, but find the venue, find the audience, and you'll really get the most out of your magic. And Allan, what about you?
That's great. I love both of the points that the two of you made just now. In terms of, just to touch very briefly on what you just said, finding the moment, I think, is extremely important. And there's a Michael Weber quote that I really, really like. And Michael graciously allowed me to quote him in a book that I wrote quite recently. So I'm going to try and repeat his quote here as well, because I think it's very valuable. And it is, "The better the magician, the less he performs outside of formal shows. And when he does, he chooses material and situations very carefully."
I think that's a very interesting, I mean, sort of on a little bit of a different level, but it's really something to resonate with people because, I mean, we didn't really get into discussing whether you should or should not perform outside of formal shows. But
it's a whole other conversation as well.
For sure, but I think one thing that's very clear about it and about that quote, which is no matter what you do, I think that what you said there, which is true, is the better the magician, the more thoughtful about those things they do. It's not just about saying, "Oh, let me just do this, whatever," and you may you young magicians perform ad nauseum, until people are tired of their magic. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that's a very resonant point.
Yeah. Please stop. I've picked 100 cards today. Yeah.
It's like name a card. It's like name them all. I think
you don't want people to get to that point. So I mean, I certainly perform a lot less outside formal shows now than I used to. But when I do, I try and choose moments when it's appropriate and when I think I'll be able to add to the moment or create or make the moment, and when I think that it'll make for a nice memory for those who are there. So that's all it is. Just make it mean something. Make it memorable. I think that's important.
I think that's beautiful. One of the things that we do in the end of this episode is we talk about the endless chain of podcast episodes. We'd love this podcast to go on for eternity, and one of the ways that we're doing that is by having each guest recommend another person to come on the podcast. So who that we have not had on would you recommend to come on the Discourse in Magic podcast?
Okay, I'm going to suggest a few names. I don't know if you've had them, but if you haven't, then you should. And if you have had them, then please tell me. One of my best friends in Magic is R. Paul Wilson from Scotland. Have you had him on yet?
We have not, but it is someone who I think was either recommended in an episode or is someone that we absolutely...
I would love to put you in touch with him, and I'm sure that if I put in a good word, and I absolutely would, he would be more than happy to do an episode with you guys.
Fantastic.
And he just finished directing a feature film called Isolani, which is playing at the Orlando. It's like a film festival in Orlando, I think, this weekend. And I think he would talk not only about magic but also about film. So awesome. I think that would be my big recommendation.
Beautiful. That is a beautiful recommendation. One of the other parts of the endless end of the podcast is the PSA, which is that we've got, I mean, my last count is roughly 1 million magicians that listen to this podcast. So
at least.
If you basically have all the magicians in the world ears to your microphone, what would you like to tell them?
Such as, do you have any...
Sure. Well, I mean, some people say things that are very positive and encouraging. Some people say stuff that are negative. We've had people say stuff like "Stop doing the vanishing bandana." Just anything where you've got all the magicians in the world listening. Maybe something that you love about magic that they should keep doing, or something that you despise about magic that if every magician could hear you say this, it would make magic better.
Oh. It's really funny because all of us who have opinions about magic, and some of us have stronger opinions than others, we're dreaming of this moment, and then when it comes,
exactly.
you don't really know what to do with it.
Exactly.
So that's how it feels for me now. So while I would love to say something that's like really profound and really like, oh wow, he's right, I don't think I'm going to be able to do that because it's going on, almost half an hour past midnight where I'm at right now.
Right.
So in my sort of going on sleepy state, I think I'll leave you guys with something inspiring. And that is that magic, however cheesy it is, magic is something that genuinely has the power to transform someone's life. Whether that is your audience or yourself. And I'm speaking from experience. Magic literally changed my life. If it wasn't for magic, I would not be talking to you guys right now.
Absolutely.
I would not have met all of the wonderful people that I've met on my path. I would not have this big burning passion. I would not have the current job that I have, which, you know, is magic. I do magic full time for anyone who's wondering. I would not have met my girlfriend, my partner. I would have not met her if it wasn't for the magic. And I would not have gotten to travel the world in the way that I have and seen all the amazing things that I've gotten to see. And I think that's the most profound and the most inspiring takeaway from magic for me, is that it literally changed my life. And when you're performing for someone, you don't know what kind of day they're having. You know, they could have had a wonderful day and you can make that better. Or they could have had a pretty crappy day and you can hope maybe you can turn that around and make it an okay day. Or maybe they've had an awful day and nothing you do, no matter if it's the best triumph ever, it's not going to make a difference. But at least
or maybe they had a good day and you ruined it with your crappy magic trick.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, yeah, of course. There's
but that's not the option that we want. And I think that's a very beautiful sentiment.
But the main point is that everything we do it to make people happy, and we do it to make people think, and we do it to make people smile, and we do it to make people ask questions. We do it to make people wonder, and I think that's really, really important. And when it comes to magicians, main takeaway would be from this conversation would be save the valuable feedback for as long as you can.
I think that's awesome.
Because you don't want to ruin that feedback. Work hard, work smart, find material that you enjoy, make it mean something, make it special, be selective about when and where you perform. Have fun doing it, always try and make it better, and ask good questions.
Wow, it sounds like you were taking notes during the episode. Those are some great points.
Totally.
So yeah, that's what it boils down to for me.
That's beautiful.
Awesome. One of the final things we do on the endless list of endless endings is we have a question of the week. So you can ask the listeners at home a question either directly to them that you want them to look introspectively, or it can be a question that you genuinely have for magicians. If you want, we'll give you the feedback that we receive. But we have a lot of listeners who like to discuss and get into the discourse via email and Facebook and Instagram and all that fun stuff. So what is your question for the listeners at home?
Let's see. I didn't get the memo, so I didn't prepare one. So I'm going to create a question on the spot right now. It's a good question. It's an introspective question, and I think it can maybe make people think more about what they do. So you do a show or you perform for someone, and then a year later, that spectator who was either in a crowd at your show or they were someone you performed for a one-on-one, whatever the situation is, they remember that they saw a magician and they're telling someone about you. What would you like them to say? What would you like their takeaway to be a year later?
That's a beautiful,
that's an incredible
beautiful question. And I think that that's something that people can...
Top 10.
Yeah, really, top 10 questions. And I think that that's something that really helps reflect what you're trying to express in your show and in your performances. And I really, really love that. And the final question in the list of questions is plugs. Tyler and I are a bunch...
So it wasn't endless?
No, it wasn't endless.
No.
So yeah, the final question is plugs. Tyler and I are a bunch of plugs. No, I'm kidding. If you have anything to plug or share, whether people should follow you, which already people should on Instagram. You don't need to say that. I will. Allan Hagen, really, really awesome to follow, particularly what's going on in the stories. But I know you've got some stuff up on Art of Magic, and you recently published a set of notes. So where can people find that?
Right. So on Art of Magic, there is an instant download of a two-face poker routine that I've been doing for some years that people enjoyed, and Elliot and the guys wanted to put it out on Art of Magic, which was really nice. So you can find it there by searching my name. And then on my website, which is, you'll find a link to it in my Instagram bio. And my Instagram username is Allan Hagen, ALLANHAGEN. I have some products for offer under the store section. Currently, it is only a book called Serendipity, which I don't have a lot of copies left of. I printed about 250 copies of it. I have 30-odd copies left. But for anyone who's interested, you can read about it on the store section, but it's a book about informal magic, performing advanced card magic in informal situations and how we make it matter. So a lot of the stuff in the essays in the book, there's 3 tricks and there's 3 essays, and a lot of the stuff in the essays kind of rings back to some of the things that we talked about here.
I think that is beautiful. Go ahead.
So that's like my only product plug for right now. But please do follow my Instagram page, as hopefully there's some interesting things there. And that's about it.
Well, that is awesome, and I think we have...
I remembered one more thing.
Go ahead.
My website, same website, which is Allan Hagen, my name, .com, also has a blog. And that is where the blog post about the practice regimen is written up. So just hit blog in the menu, or just go to allanhagen.com/blog, and you will find a backlog of blog posts. They're not as frequent right now, but I will try and write them more frequently about magic theory, about performance, about all of those things. And hopefully you'll find a lot of the same stuff that we talked about here I've already written about on the blog, and they're just my philosophies. So if you like my thinking, you will like the blog.
And I will mention that is how I originally sort of found you and got deeper into your content past the cool photos and such that you were posting, and that was why you are here. So it's a fantastic blog, and I highly recommend it to people because there's great material on it, and just the ability to talk on and read on these theory topics is obviously the whole reason why we started the podcast. And any resources for magicians to study with that are fantastic. So with that, a big huge thank you for coming on the podcast and joining us. And as always, a thank you for the people at home. There you go, you did it. About an hour or so, no pinky counts, no pinky breaks. Props to you guys for learning theory. And yeah, I think that this episode was a very, very practical one for you to take magic, no matter where you are on that journey, whether you're just searching for what to like.
Practical theory for you.
Exactly. Whether you're searching for what to like, or you are trying to make it good, make it better, learn how to get feedback, anything and everything, it's all covered. So with that, thank you so much, Allan. And for the rest of you, we'll see you. Thank you so much. We'll see you all next Thursday.
Take care.
Well, there you have it. I hope you liked that episode. I think this was one of the most practical and applicable episodes for close-up magic that we've ever had on the podcast. So if you do close-up magic, this basically is the manual as to how to take it and how to get good, how to pick your effects and things of that nature. So do not be lazy. Start taking some action, start practicing, and start getting great. Thanks so much, and see you next Thursday.